All right. Welcome to the Every Third Saturday podcast, number...
Whatever this one is.
Yep, don't know. But we got a exciting guest today. We have Josh Guyse from Duke Cannon. He's a veteran, and Duke Cannon is a great partner of Every Third Saturday, and so we wanted to talk some about that and learn more about Josh himself. So with that, I'd say, Josh, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Tom. Hi, Eric.
Hey.
I find it a little interesting you invite the Army guy and have to have two Marines in the room to control me, but
It's for your safety, really.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I grew up in the West Coast. I grew up in San Francisco, had pretty amazing hippie parents, and like every great hippie kid, I grew up and joined the Army. I joined the Army in 1989. And then we sort of had the drawdown in the early 90s. There was no more dragons left to slay, and the world was a fairly quiet place at the time. Left the Army, went and worked in corporate America, and that's where I was working when September 11th occurred. I still had friends that were serving. I had friends that wound up deploying in 2003, and suddenly I found myself pushing paperwork in corporate America. I had no meaning to me anymore.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back into the military. As an infantryman, U.S. Army, deployed to Iraq several times, deployed to Afghanistan, had a deployment in there to Kuwait, even though some people claim Kuwait's not a real deployment. Still away from your family, all those
Sure, it counts.
Yeah, it still counts. And sort of did, those things as would be expected of anybody serving during that time. Came home from Iraq in 2007. Found myself in a sort of a really bad place, and really struggled with the whole transition back to the civilian world after being in Iraq. I found that deployment, while not easy, was simple. You're on mission or you're not on mission. You don't have to think about clothes. You don't have to think about washing clothes. You don't have to think about all the things that we think about back home. And I really struggled to sort of process when I got back. I was struggling to be that same person that I was before we left. And I was not doing very well with that. I sort of began this downward spiral. I couldn't make my relationship work. That had been a really bad deployment. We had taken casualties, really poor leadership on that deployment. A lot of leadership was relieved for cause. And just continued to struggle and continued sort of that downward spiral. Fortunately, I had some people around me that recognized that it was an issue, and one day I sort of found myself in a car driving up here to Minneapolis, as it turned out to be, right down the road from here, and went in, and I was going through intake, and the nurse asked me a series of questions and then said, "Hey, are you willing to spend a night here at the VA for observation?" Yeah, I said, "Absolutely." She said, "Great, I'll have the nurse from the floor come and get you, and we'll take you to your room." And this nurse comes in, and people on the podcast can't see me, but I'm about 6'2", 230 pounds, and this nurse walks in, and she's probably 4'11", maybe 80 pounds soaking wet. And she walks in and starts talking to me, and we start having this conversation as we're walking down the hall, and we sort of make this bend, this left turn, and there's some doors in front of us, and she turns to me and she says, "Hey, they did tell you that this is a locked facility, right?" And I said, no, they didn't tell me that. And she's like, "Well, it is." And I think she realized she had to tell me before we hit those doors, because if I hit those doors, I wasn't going in. She wasn't getting me in those doors. So I immediately think of, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Nurse Ratched, and I'm going to walk in, they're going to hand me a cup of pills, and that's what my experience is going to be. But I went in, I learned later that the floor is 1K, and it is a locked facility. And they brought me in, they took away all my stuff, they gave me some scrubs, some gripper socks.
Grippy socks.
Yep. And sort of put me in a bed, and came and checked on me every 15 minutes, made sure I was safe, made sure I was comfortable. And that sort of began my path back. People sometimes look at me a little different when I say I spent a week at a locked psych facility, but I'm here to tell you that I have discharge papers from 1K that say I'm sane. So unless you have discharge papers from a locked psych facility, I got to question your sanity a little bit. So ultimately, I spent about 5 weeks at the VA here in Minneapolis. ultimately I was diagnosed with PTSD, major depressive disorder, and a couple other things, and began that path, back to recovery and healing. Sure. I think the biggest piece that I took from there was I struggled to mesh this hippie kid who grew up in San Francisco, who grew up in this environment of empathy, right? Everything was empathy. And you focused on the empathy, and you couldn't understand people until you had, journeyed in their shoes. And then you go to a place like Iraq, and there is no more empathy, right? You're either in a uniform like me, and so much so that either you're in my platoon or you're not. And if you're not in my platoon, I no longer trust you. Mm-hmm. So I really struggled with that, sort of the meshing of those two people. And I think the moment that it became clear to me was when a nurse told me, I would submit to you that coming back from that, you wouldn't be the same person, and it's okay to not be that same person. And that's really what sort of was the trigger in my head. And actually, because of that nurse, ultimately, I wound up going into nursing. I went back to school, became a registered nurse, worked as a bedside nurse for many years, and then had the opportunity to go back on active duty in the Minnesota National Guard. So I'm an active Guard soldier now. But that was sort of my path back to healing. And then in 2011, on a deployment, Duke Cannon launched. And I was part of Duke Cannon before Duke Cannon was ever Duke Cannon. Back when the company was going to be called Kirk Cockwood. And we were building a brand more so than building a men's grooming products company. And we were there. I was part of the original conversations and sort of brought in for the authenticity aspect of, what's real to the military, what's not. For example, when we launched our dry shampoo, it was like, the question was like, hey, would you ever carry this in the field? And I'm like, there's 0% chance as an infantryman I'm carrying that into the field, for two reasons. One, the weight, and two, the ridicule that I would get for trying to pull that out and use it. So I'm not using it. But Duke Cannon has always sort of wanted to be authentic to the military and authentic to veterans. And what does that look like? So that's sort of always been my role at Duke Cannon since before it was even Duke Cannon, all the way up until today with me sitting here in front of you.
Yeah, and I use Duke Cannon products. And so, I'm sitting right here with them, folks. When you read on there, veteran approved, like literally sitting right here. It's the real deal. It's not just some marketing slogan. So, yeah, that's authenticity is huge. We talk about it all the time in our Warriors Return program. So it's cool to see a company that lives it, breathes it.
Yeah, that's like, so when we were smaller, it was easier to do, but so much of the products, I would take it out in the field and I would test it. It was me and my dudes. We would take the stuff out into the field and we would test it. Like, is this legitimate? Is this good quality product stuff? And that was. It's true to Duke Cannon today. We wanted to make stuff for hardworking men. We wanted to make as much of the stuff here in the United States as possible, or to source the stuff here in the United States as possible. And we wanted to give back to veterans. And that's just always been our goal. And how do you remain authentic towards that? Oh. And, this partnership with Every Third Saturday is as authentic as it can be. What it is that you do, what it is that you bring. We at Duke Cannon, we've always given back to veteran causes. Back in 2011, it was $300 for, one veteran to fly out to World War II vet to fly out on honor flight to DC to see the memorial. But that's, we were small. We were selling, individual bars to, our friends and family. All the way up to now where, we make $1 million contributions to some of the partnerships that we have. And we sort of looked at a couple of years ago, how do we partner? Who do we partner with? And what are the areas that we want to address when we do make those partnerships? And so we reached out to veterans and we did a lot of research to what veterans saying that are transitioning out of the military back in the civilian world. What are they saying they need? And we sort of identified different pillars. And what we love about Every Third Saturday is you meet a ton of those pillars. You addressed food scarcity with the free meals every third Saturday of the month, which is something veterans tell us that they're concerned about. Community is another huge piece. I think it's like 64% of veterans, when they leave the military service, say they struggle making lasting relationships in the civilian world. that they had, compared to what they had in the military. And this sense of community in this place is amazing. I just spent the last hour sitting over at Rick's watching people come and go, and the interaction between the team working at Rick's and the public and the people when they came in was amazing. So you do that, and that's authentic, that's real. You can't fake that piece. So I love it. I love it when we come here and we cook food and the people come in and you get to have conversations with some of these veterans. And some of the veterans have told me this is the one time a month that they can come in someplace and sit down and have interaction with other people. And I mean, that's significant.
Yeah. And you guys bring a lot to the table there too. The few times that you guys have been out here, supporting us and hosting events, like your team's always got a smile on their face. Like there's not one person that's not approachable. There's not one person that looks like, oh man, I have to work on a Saturday. Like you guys have a great crew going on.
Yeah. And it's from the top down. I mean, we've had our CEO out here flipping hamburgers and he loves it. Right. So again, because the core values, our core values match your core values. Some of the mission of the Duke Cannon Veterans Fund, which is what I head, is slightly different than Duke Cannon. So I, manage all the charitable, but if I look at our vision, our mission statement, it mirrors significantly what it is that you have when we talk about community, we talk about resilience, we talk about respect. Those are important. Nobody got rich, barring maybe just some generals who left to work for the Department of Defense contractors. None of us got rich in the service, right? So, we just, asked that when we left the service that we get taken care of and to the level that we're promised to be taken care of. And the government can't always do that, or people are uncomfortable going to the government for that support. So it's community organizations like this that deliver on that. And there's a lot of really good organizations out there that do a lot of good work, and ETS is definitely one of them.
Well, thank you. And it's because of partners like Duke Cannon that we can do it. Otherwise we'd be sitting in the water without a paddle. But I'm curious how much what you do today, how much has been influenced? It's obviously influenced by your deployments and service, but how much is influenced by the relationships you developed while you're, say, deployed? And how does that relate to giving back to veterans today?
That's a really good question. So, my personal experiences with mental health and what that transitioning experience was like, definitely I am who I am today in part because of that. That deployment in 2006, 2007, we've had 8 people out of that company who have died by suicide since that deployment. And I've been to too many funerals from people I deployed with, or friends that I didn't deploy with but that I met in the military that have died by suicide. I've watched people struggle with mental health. I've watched people struggle with dependency. All of that has had a significant influence on me. So I'm a senior NCO on the M-Day side, so your traditional guard side of the house. I'm a first sergeant of a headquarters company in an armored battalion. The full-time side, I'm a battalion NCOIC. So there's 600 odd soldiers that I feel I'm responsible for, right? And as a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army, the two things that are always uppermost in our mind is accomplishment of the mission and the welfare of the soldier. To me, that doesn't change just because I'm not on duty or I'm off duty or the service member has left the organization and is no longer a service member. They made that commitment to the service. I've made that commitment to them. And how can I best influence that? What can I do beyond just what I had available to them when they were service members? What can I do to continue to help them now that they're no longer service members? What can I do to help those veterans? So when the opportunity came to take over control of the Duke Cannon Veterans Fund and be more deliberate in our giving, I jumped at that opportunity. I mean, I love every second of it. I love veterans. I love who they are, why they served. I love hearing their stories. And I'll never stop being able to give, or never stop giving back to veterans on whatever that looks like. because again, nobody got wealthy joining the military. All the people that I deployed with, they swore an oath to the Constitution and deployed to defend this country. And I don't think that you can't put a value on that. So we owe it to them to give back and to help them through the transitions, to help them through their bad times, their dark days. I love the fact that I've watched ETS, grow over the years from, it started with some blankets, right? And then, then you had every third Saturday, and then the store was only open on Saturdays. Now your store is open all the time. And then you have, the Pop Smoke program. You have all these additional programs, Rick's next door. Like I love that. And, as a community, I mean, every community could do that, right? Every community has the ability to do that. I mean, you take care of the people that you can take care of in your community. So, there's an old expression, think globally and act locally to make that impact. And, I love the fact that the neighborhood that you chose, how close you are to the VA, those are all great things.
Yeah, and what we're really, really trying to build is that community. I know the day I had to get out of the Marine Corps, due to injury, I remember standing outside the barracks, just looking at it and saying, everybody I love is in there, and I can't go in. I'm no longer welcome. And it was a really, really tough moment and spun me out. A lot of drinking, a lot of fighting, a lot of trouble, getting arrested, and that transition that you talked about is really difficult, especially the tighter the bond, the harder it breaks, and really can surprise you and sneak up on you a little bit. And I probably should have been in a 1K. I wasn't here in Minnesota, but that's where I belonged. So it was time for a timeout, which I didn't get. But
you did some gripper socks.
Yeah, I did. But it's that sense of community, really, that we want to build, and that Duchanan brings. With everything from the branding to the people, to the whole corporate value system is. Really, it screams of community. It's really cool, and there's a lot of synergy, I think, between what we do and well, not what we do, but how we do it and how we approach, the veteran population. And you mentioned that 8 people committing suicide, and we're just starting to work on it's in its infancy, but a concept that's wrapped around the idea of fire teams, where we train a fire team leader in suicide prevention techniques, and then that individual is either assigned or chooses 3 people to be in their fire team, and we're hoping that can reduce the amount of suicides that we see, the amount of substance abuse, give people a place to that last call before you make that mistake, or you take that permanent action. Give that last call to your fire team leader, to someone in your fire team, to say, I'm not going to make it today. I'm not, and to have someone respond back. I've been in that position. Tried the Veterans Crisis Line, wasn't as successful as I had hoped. And I think creating connection and community, especially in a tight group, kind of like being overseas, can really hopefully help us stay left of bang, which is...
And I get wrapped up in this a lot. So, I mean, yes, ultimately, bottom line, suicide prevention, but really hoping that it helps vets to not even get there, right? We want to stay as far left of crisis management as we need to. So I've been working on different demographics and hobbies and interests and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's important. And I mean, people talk about it all the time, but nobody's doing it, right? So we're trying to be the doers, not just the talkers, and try to make a difference.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. When somebody gets to acute crisis, it's very difficult to get them to pick up the phone. It can happen, but a lot of that is the work that you put in ahead of time. A couple of years ago, we had a service member reach out to me, and he had a gun in his hand, and I got another service member, kept him on the phone the whole time, drove to his house. And I don't advocate for people to put themselves in a situation where somebody has a firearm, but it was years of building that relationship to get to that point that when that person hit acute crisis mode, they could call. But ideally, we don't ever get to the acute crisis mode. Ideally, the fire team is already established and we have those bonds. I tell people the bonds that we had in the formation, I knew everything about my dudes, and I just use the word dudes because I grew up in the infantry. It was all men, but whether they're brothers or sisters isn't relative. I knew everything about them, and there's some things that I wish I didn't know about them, but that's the type of relationship you have to have, and those are the bonds that we form, which is why sometimes those military bonds even exceed those of blood relatives or people because of the shared experiences that you have and the tight confines that you have. There's no secrets in a gun truck. Kind of thing. And if we can build those bonds amongst veterans, because nobody understands a veteran quite like another veteran, hopefully we can get people comfortable talking about it and comfortable getting help, right? We don't lose brothers and sisters because they break a leg, because nobody's afraid to ask for help when they break a leg. So we just need to get to the point where they're like, hey, I'm struggling, and it's okay to go get help. It's okay for us to take them to get the help that they need. Because nobody would judge you if you went in and got a broken leg, but people, the whole concept of stigma around mental health, or they don't want to admit that they have something wrong. And I promise you, nobody wakes up in the morning hoping to be struggling with a mental health crisis any more than they hope to wake up with a broken leg.
Right, right. And people had a thought that escaped me, but
I hate it when that happens.
Right.
Happens quite frequently, for being honest.
In it goes, out it goes.
Yeah.
But the thought was how we have to change the narrative to say you're weak if you seek help. To really, that's the ultimate act of courage.
100%.
Is to say, put your hand up, and I can't do it alone. I just can't, and it's not going to turn out well. And that's a big stigma to overcome. It's so ingrained in the military culture. But I think you see it, like a dirty little secret is the suicide rate amongst special operations soldiers and sailors. It's amazing. People you think that have that mental resilience, if they can break, then anyone else can break too. And that the story's not told enough, but it's an amazing thing to it's freedom, and it's taking control back to say I need help, and getting that help. I think the VA in Minneapolis in particular is excellent. They have just a great approach and a great staff. They're open-minded and really take good care. I know we had a buddy that was in 1K for 17 days, and it was probably the most productive 17 days for his mental health that he had in his whole life, because you just get that time out and get that break you need to stop the chaos that's going on in your heart and your mind. And so it's cool that you said yes, rather than saying I ain't going in there, no way. You did it, and that's courageous. That takes balls to do that, and I think veterans need to understand that is the act of bravery right there. To do it for not only themselves, but for their family, for their community. I keep a picture on the wall of my office of a line of cars down the street, and that line of cars was at my best friend's funeral. He killed himself, and he thought there was no one that loved him, no one that cared, and all these people showed up. Hundreds of people showed up, and if you can just get that through to someone, like, listen, man, this is gonna pass. It will pass, and just make that call. Just pause for a second, and not make that terrible permanent decision to a temporary situation. And so credit to you for doing that and talking about it, and that's how we break the stigma.
Yeah, I agree. So I remember the first time I came out of 1K and I went through treatment, and the Army was sort of launching its resilience program. Military is very good at training you to deploy forward. They're not so great about training you to prepare for life when you come back. And it was one of the very early onsets to the resilience program in the military, and they had this civilian nurse in there, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure scenario, and it's a little uncomfortable. So people typical of us are making jokes about it, but I'm sort of watching all these service members not just to kind of ignore it. And I stood up and I said, here's my story and here's why this is important. And I told it in a way that infantry dudes would relate. I used the F word like a comma, so they knew it was important.
It was serious.
Yeah, it was a serious conversation. And I was an infantry NCO, and junior soldiers were generally terrified of me. But here I am talking about my personal experiences of not wanting them to have to experience that, or if they are experiencing trouble, get help right away. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I did that solely because I wanted to fight that stigma. And I ended the statement at that time, because it was an infantry line unit, and I said, hey, I'm 6'3" and 220 pounds, and if you think I'm weak, asking for help, let me know, and we'll go behind the building and settle it. And so, but you're not weak. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Some people go, oh, it'll affect my career. I've been promoted multiple times since then. It has never once affected my military career, right? Nobody has judged me. Nobody has made a comment to me about my story, and I've been very open with this story. I've told this story to rooms filled with soldiers. I've told it into rooms with multiple star generals, and it's never once affected my career. So nobody is weak, asking for help. It's a sign of courage, as you indicated. It's a sign of strength.
Yeah, I remember that was probably the hardest thing I had to do. I deployed to Afghanistan twice. No shortage of experiences there, but definitely the hardest thing that I had to do was with my 3rd unit. It was my first, opportunity and role to be a platoon sergeant. We were in Okinawa getting ready to go on a MEU, 31st MEU, and it was, I think, literally like a week or a couple days even before we were supposed to get on the boat, and I had to stand up in front of all 80 of my dudes and say, I'm not going with you. I would rather go back to combat than have to do that again. But it's and you've both kind of alluded to it too, like, and I firmly believe it. Everybody's got a purpose, right? And kind of like how people think that nobody's going to be at their funeral or whatever. Like, think about it this way, like, what's your tombstone, you got the day that you were born and the day that you died, but then there's that funny looking dash in the middle. It's like, what does that mean? What does that stand for? What did you do? What is your dash? So that's what I like to tell people, is like, you're here for something. You there's something out there for you. Make your dash meaningful.
Yeah, we're all trying, I think, and that's all we can do is try, do our best. We're all flawed individuals. Some of it from the military, some of it just we're natural born dumbasses. but we're all trying, and that's really another message. Like, just do something. It's when you start doing nothing that that downward spiral can really begin. And just do something. And that's our hope, with the fire team concept, is you just send a text or, say, hey, you want to get a cup of coffee, or do something. And so really, once again, kudos to you and to Eric as well, who reached out for help when he needed it. And I guess I'm the late bloomer here at this table. They made me go through PTSD treatment in the Marine Corps, and then all I wanted to do was get back to my unit and tell them what they want to hear, and let me get back to my peeps, and but I'm going to transition a little bit because Duke Cannon is so involved in the veterans community and so generous. Can you tell us a little bit, for if anyone doesn't know Duke Cannon, how do you describe it?
So Duke Cannon is a men's grooming product company. Our motto is work harder, smell better. And we started with what we call the big ass brick of soap. That's the first product we had, which was a 12-ounce bar of soap. It's made in a factory in Tennessee. It's the same formula of soap that was used by Korean soldiers in Korea. So that's how Duke Cannon started. We started with that bar soap. And we were originally just going to create a brand that marketed towards men. And it was going to be big ass, insert product here. So we were going to have big ass piece of beef jerky. But the goal was to market towards men, products particularly for men, without the sort of played out stereotypical advertisement towards men of scantily clad women, that whole piece, but products legitimately marketed towards men. Well, the soap was such a huge success that we started to continue that. And as you grow and as more and more retailers want to have your product in their store, they ask for you to sort of round out your product lines. Hey, can you include this? Can you include that? And so now Duke Cannon has an entire men's hygiene line. So we have soap, we have what we call thick, which is a body wash, we have shampoo, we have stuff for your hair, we have beard products, we have Cannon Balm, which is a lip balm, we have Bloody Knuckles, which is a hand cream. So we have cologne, which is a huge piece of Duke Cannon deodorant.
Solid cologne.
Solid, yeah. We also have solid cologne,
which is very cool.
Yeah, that stuff is great. It works really well too if you want an air freshener for your car. And so, and it was always, but we wanted it for hardworking men, right? That was the sole purpose, was we wanted quality American products for hardworking men. Now, I can't say that everything is made in the United States, because if you were to try to show me a company in the United States that makes the little sprayers for cologne, they just don't exist here in the United States. So unfortunately, some of our stuff has to be sourced from out of the United States. But as much as we can, we have it's products that are made here. Our tactical loofah, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's our
I use it every day.
Perfect. We've expanded that because the company has grown, but the original maker of that is actually a Marine vet who makes hammocks out on the West Coast. And we went to him, and he came up with the tactical loofah, and that was because Duluth Trading Company asked for us to make soap on a rope, and that was sort of the answer to soap on a rope. So as the product line has grown, Duke Cannon has grown. We're now nationally carried by multiple retailers. We're in the base exchanges, the post exchanges worldwide. I had buddies that were in the Horn of Africa a couple of years ago sending me pictures of Duke Cannon products in the Horn of Africa for sale. So the company has grown significantly, and as that grew, sort of the donations grew to nonprofits. And so what was happening was our CEO at the time, he would go around and say, hey, what nonprofit should we donate to this quarter? And then he'd write him a check, and off would go the check. And then a nonprofit would say, hey, this is great, thank you, but who are you, and are you donating again next quarter? And we started looking at, okay, let's start building partnerships. Let's start building longer term commitments to these organizations, and let's not so helter-skelter like write a check to insert organization here. I think there's 4,400 odd veteran nonprofits in the United States, And some of them do amazing work. Some of them don't do so much amazing work. And what is it that we're supporting? Are we supporting somebody who wants a hunting trip to Alaska and is going to use a veteran to get that funded for them? And is it actually cathartic for the veteran? It's like, hey, great, they went out and went hunting for a week, but they came home and died by suicide 3 days later. So where's the impact? And that we were having a discussion. We were in New York City. We were out there for Army-Navy football game, and just decided to create the Buchanan Veterans Fund and sort of be more deliberate in our efforts of giving and sort of start building partnerships that were multiple year commitments of donations, so places could rely on us, or they would know they would have a revenue stream coming in.
No, and with your size and awareness of the product, and you got to have people knocking down your door as far as the Veterans Fund, like the Every Third Saturdays of the world are saying, hey, can you help us out? It's got to be tough to discern, who's doing good work, who's struggling, and where a resource is best allotted.
It is. So in order to address part of that, we created a charter, and then we created the pillars. So I looked at all the exit interviews from the Soldier for Life and Marine for Life program. So there's tens of thousands of veterans that have left the military that sort of say, hey, these are the things that we need. We looked at the VA studies that came out of the VA. University of Southern California actually has quite a bit of research into it as well. And we sort of identified what is it that the veterans are telling us they want. And then we even went to the Buchanan user. We have a thing called the Buchanan Lodge, and we just posted up there, hey, if you're a veteran, what is it that you're looking for as you transition out of the service? So we looked at all those numbers and created sort of these pillars that we want to address. So we want to address housing. We want to address food insecurity. We want to address mental health. We want to address community. And how can we best go about that? So sort of the first thing I do whenever I look at a nonprofit is, how many of these pillars are you addressing? That's the first question. So the more pillars that you can address in that, the better. And then the next thing I start looking at is, okay, how long you've been around? What's the reputation? Like, I'll contact veterans that are in that area. What's the reputation of this organization? Have you personally used this organization? There's a really large national nonprofit who will remain nameless, but I had a buddy who used to wear a hat from them, and it said, insert nonprofit name here, alumni. And I would ask, well, what did you get for them? What did they help you with? And he's like, well, they sent me this hat and my wife a t-shirt. I'm like, well, that's fantastic. And then we do further vetting. I'll reach out to them, and as we're talking, one of my standard questions is, if I give you $10,000, how many veterans does that $10,000 help? And then I can extrapolate from there. And then there's some organizations that, I start looking, what is it that they're actually doing in the community? I mean, they might be a large organization, but I see, well, they're looking for donations to sponsor insert golf tournament here, or insert concert here, or insert this here. But I'm like, well, but how many veterans is that going to help? Like, if I sponsor your golfing event, how many, you make all this money, how many veterans does that help, or does that just go into the next golfing event? And so those are the things that I take a deep dive into, because I want to be authentic. I want to give back to organizations that are really giving back, because there's some huge national brands that it'd be simple to write them one check, ship off the check, and just put their logo on a bar of soap and go, we donate to them, and everybody would be great. And I'm not saying that some of them aren't doing good work, because they are, but where can I make a greater impact?
Sure.
So because I look at some of them and I look at their financials, and I'm like, you're almost making as much in donations as Buchanan is selling a year in soap. So where I could write, a $5,000 check over here and have an impact, I could give them the comparable $5,000, and they would never notice. Right. That's a rounding error on their financials. So, and those are the things that we look at, because again, we want to be authentic. We like entrepreneurials. I mean, we remember what it was like to be, 4 dudes trying to make a decision on what we're going to do. And so, we like the gritty nature. We like entrepreneurial organizations. We like people that are community based, that are doing the good works there in the community.
Well, doing great work. It's a great company, and I think everyone. Well, I don't know everyone's bathroom habits here, but thankfully, but I know me and Eric both use Buchanan.
Absolutely.
My wife loves the Buffalo Trace beard oil.
Yeah, Buffalo Trace, hands down. My Alyssa goes nuts.
Yeah,
absolutely nuts.
It's a good product.
Well, and let's just talk about that for a second. So I use the Tea Tree Anchorman shampoo or whatever. I love Tea Tree. Buchanan makes it awesome, great. I'm all about it. What I cannot get over is one big ass brick of soap in the tactical scrubber. 90 days, 100 days, like 3 months, I'm using 1 bar of soap. Nothing else is comparable to that. And that, I mean, I'm a collector guy, so every time they do like a Christmas pack or a holiday pack or whatever, I'll buy it, right? I've bought a couple ammo cans, got a couple of hatchets. It's cool. It's marketed for men, right? It's not for clowns. It's for men. Right. So I probably have 30 bars of soap, and I use 4 a year. I'm set for life. It's a great product. It really is.
It's been kind of a revolution in our bathroom because, the girls, I had a wife and 2 girls and a boy growing up, and the girls just dominated, the shelf in the shower, and now we're giving them a run for their money.
Yeah.
And it all says Buchanan on it.
And when my boys, graduated, they could shower on their own and stuff now. They've got tactical scrub. I've got one in my shower. They've got 2 hanging in their shower that they share. Like I don't know that there's anything out there that I would ever change for.
Yeah, the products themselves are amazing. It's the quality's there, and the quality control and all the things, the processes that it all goes through is pretty significant before the product actually goes out. And we just talked about the big ass brick of soap, right? Because that's what got Buchanan started. Mm-hmm. The packaging now says not for clowns. Once upon a time, it used to say, "We'll get you clean, won't get you laid." If you have some of the really old packaging. But you're absolutely right. One of those bars of soap at a price point, if you were to buy it off of the website at Buchanan, is like $9.99, but it's going to last you months as opposed to some of the other stuff that's out there, and within a couple weeks it's gone.
Right.
You're using 12, 13, 14 bars in that same span.
Yep. There was a competitor out there that released a box set. It's something that I have an affinity for. And it was a matter of days, and it was gone. And it's like, this is not, like, it was cool, but the product wasn't there. It was not up to snuff.
So what is the future of Buchanan? I love entrepreneurship. I've had my own business at one time, and what does the future look like for the company?
Well, we've grown significantly. So again, I can remember the days when Anthony, the bars of soap would come in 13-foot long bars of soap and cutting them by hand. As a matter of fact, if you have some from the first 100 batches, you'll see some angles in the soap when the cut wasn't straight. Too many glasses of wine, I think, by that point. So from that standpoint to this year alone, Buchanan so far this year has had 11 new employees. So we're just over 70 odd team members. Located here in Minnesota. There's some people, some longtime users of Buchanan. A couple years ago, a private equity firm bought part of Buchanan, and they're like, "Oh, you guys have sold out and you haven't been the same." But that's not really true, because Buchanan just got to the point where, in order to grow, you had to have an infusion of cash,
right?
In order to take sort of that next step. And that's what they provided to us. They're called Main Post Partners. They're out in San Francisco-based organization, phenomenal people. And that's where we are. We're now making those steps. So we made some changes last year at Buchanan. A new CEO has come into Buchanan. And our goal, which has always been our goal since day one, and there's a reason why there's an anti-axe symbol on Buchanan, is we want axe to no longer be a competitor in the marketplace. And that's the goal. So hopefully within 5 years, we can be that company that replaced Axe. So, people don't smell like a high school locker room perpetually.
Right.
Yep.
Smell like a man, damn it.
Well, that's the goal. And do it with humor, right? Like, I don't know if you saw on our website, but we recently, to celebrate March Madness, we have our NIL, so we're sponsoring a mascot from the University of Iowa, the University of Iowa's mascot, Iowa State's mascot. That's who's getting our NIL money for the tournament.
That is awesome.
So we always try to do things with a sense of humor. That's, again, one of the sort of the processes at Duke Cannon it's always with a sense of humor.
Sure. And I think we share that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of hard conversations when you're dealing with veterans in need, but there's also a lot of fun to be had.
Well, and I think, you have to. Something's got to lighten it up, right? You can't just go all day, every day talking about depression and suicide. And even the most resilient of us, that would drain, that would wear on you. So, we talk about all the, what do you do for you, right? Some people use the word self-care. Some people don't like that word, whatever. But, there's got to be an element that, like, you've got to get some relief from it.
Right. And it's a lot of times comic relief.
Most of the time. And most of the time, going back to only service members understand service members, not very clean.
No.
Not at all. Rather blue, if you will.
So, Jesse is our executive director and also my wife. Constantly
polices that hard.
Constantly on Eric and James, our front desk person, who, hey, watch the language.
Yeah, right. And it's, we do use the F word like a comma. It doesn't, my mom will say it all the time. Well, you're talking like a Marine. Like, well, yeah, it's, the better part of a decade of my life. Right. Like, it's just, it is what it is, Ma. I'm sorry.
I heard the title here.
I grew up in New York, and I was in the Marine Corps.
Right.
And so I was like fluent in
I had a crack in khakis.
Course language, but over 20 years, she's pretty much broken me of it. I'll let one slip once in a while. But
being a registered nurse that transition was pretty simple for me, because I looked at the registered nurse as the non-commissioned officer, the medical doctor as the commissioned officer. They write the orders, and then the NCO carries out the orders. And you're the one that's there taking care of the patient, like you're providing all the care, just like an NCO take care of soldiers. But nurses, there's times where I was blushing. Times where I was blushing. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm like, and I thought a bunch of 11 Bravo infantry dudes could have a dark sense of humor. Let me tell you, some of those nurses. Oof.
Yeah, my daughter is a registered nurse at a VA in Kansas City, and her vernacular has changed a little bit in the 2 years she's been nursing.
Wow.
And things, sometimes she uses a word or two. I say, well,
that's not normal.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things that get you, as you say, right through those moments, those hardships, because you can cry or you can laugh, and as the expression goes at it. And I'll never forget this moment. I was in Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was winter. It was pouring rain. It was cold, and it was miserable. And there was no more hope of pulling security. And it was me and two other dudes fighting over who was going to be in the middle, trying to lie under one poncho. Mm-hmm. And we were out there all night, just miserable, laughing like school kids, because that's all we could do. And I mean, hopefully I'll have that memory the rest of my life, because I mean, I just look back on it, and it sucked, but we were having the best time of our lives in that moment.
And so, I don't know, Eric, you got anything else?
I don't think so. I'm just reminiscing over here now. Just some of the worst times, but you'll remember them because at the end of the day, you're right, they were fun. It's just, I'm just caught up in memories, just being soaking wet and just not even caring.
Remember, we tried to build a moat around us
There we go.
to try and keep the water out of the
Water
middle.
trench,
And,
yep.
yeah,
Yep.
that didn't
work.
No, yeah, try to two-man fighting pause. I mean, a water sump. Nobody actually ever dug a water sump. I mean, yeah, it's in the field manual, but
We got a first sergeant just watching us, just shaking his head. Knows exactly how this is going to end. With us soaking wet, it's all our shit, everything.
yeah.
So, how about you, Josh? Got anything else?
No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And if you're in the Minneapolis area, come on by every third Saturday.
Yeah.
Great place to be.
You can find us online, everythirdsaturday.org or 952-356-5116. Krista's going to kill me. There's a text number out there. You can text HOPE to a number to help support us, but I don't have that.
No, I don't
So,
either. We're the weak.
It's out there.
We're the weak links. In
Maybe
this
the
team.
next episode we'll remember that.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being so open and
Yeah.
giving up your time to come in and hang out with us. And we really appreciate not only Duke Cannon, but you personally.
Absolutely.
As a partner. It means a lot to us. And so hopefully we'll see you around soon. And good luck to Duke Cannon. They don't need our luck. They're doing great. But I guess that's all we got.
Axe the axe, baby. We're out.
Perfect.